Predictions of death. One of the most common questions people have for astrologers and fortune tellers is, how long will I live? When will I die? If life follows a certain rationale, then is it possible to determine when it will end as well? More precisely, we saw how it is karma, the software of life that determines the span and the nature of life. So, is it possible to somehow read this and be able to predict death? Now, just as karma is impressed upon your physical body and mental body, it is also impressed upon your energy body. As the allotted karma or prarabdha karma is reaching completion, the pranic body's ability to hold on to the physical body recedes. Life, as you know it, which is physical, will begin to lose its vibrancy. At the same time, the subtle body gathers more vibrancy because the physical body is losing its grip on the subtle. This is the reason why you might have noticed that sometimes even a person who has lived a gross life seems to carry an ethereal peace about them during the last few days preceding their death. Such a person, you will see, suddenly becomes wise. This usually happens for people whose awareness becomes acute. However, if someone is dying a natural death, then with a little bit of awareness, at least 6 to 8 months in advance, one can clearly see it coming. Actually, many people unknowingly start talking about it. They start making strange statements and behave strangely. This is not out of psychological degeneration. Unconsciously, they blurt out this and that. Later on, after they are dead, people look back and say that he or she had said this or did something which was indicative that they were aware of their impending death. An uncle of mine even knew the exact date and time of his death. Death is not something that will happen suddenly. It builds up over time. Many a time, the body is setting forth the process. The person may not be fully conscious of it. The mind may not be alert enough to grasp it. But the body speaks it in many ways. Apparently, there have been some studies examining the blood work of people who were killed violently through crime or accidents. Their blood tests were done on a whim or just by chance or for some other reason. A little prior to their death, no one knew they were going to die, but by chance they got it done. And those reports were found to be completely haywire. They spoke a different language altogether. I don't know how far this is true, but this sort of thing is quite possible because it may have nothing to do with the physiological problems. As the body approaches its end, the entire body starts speaking the language of death at that time. So, is it possible to predict death? Yes, it is possible, but it is very limited and highly exaggerated. If I see a coconut tree, looking at the age and the health of the coconut tree, I can say when it will first bear flower, when it will bear fruit. I can also foretell approximately when it will die. I can tell you all this right now, but in between now and that time, if you chop the coconut tree down, the prediction becomes false. This is true for human beings too. Whatever the horoscopes say, someone can die just like that. A whole lot of people in the world died yesterday in an accident or from disease or such things. Do you think all their horoscopes said they were going to die yesterday? No. They all said long life, but they died at 25. You may have heard of this. Traditionally in India, before one marries up their children to someone, they always scrutinize the horoscopes of the two people. They do this because they want to make sure that the temperament of the two people are compatible. They also want to make sure that their children have a long and prosperous life. Yet, it has happened many times that even after all this, the man who they got their daughter married to died in a few days. Of course, if they were able to know that he was going to die in 3 days, they would never have got their girl married to him. This is not to say that there is no basis to these calculations. It is just that these calculations are very limited in scope and their significance is exaggerated. One's death is usually set in relationship to one's solar cycles, which are approximately 12 years each. In other words, the phase or segment of the solar cycle in which you will die is largely set. The day and time are not very relevant because it need not necessarily happen exactly like that. You can take a few more breaths or some medic may pump something into you and you may live a little longer. All these things can happen, but if you have the necessary perception and look at a person, it could easily determine as to which segment of the solar cycle he or she will go in. It has happened that it looks like the person is going to die by such and such time. Even their medical parameters indicate death. But still, I have said they are not going to die now. That is because they are in the wrong segment of their solar cycle to die. Even in their designated segment, if they pass just that element or situation, they may not die because the death may get pushed for some more rounds. There are many Indian historical stories where people have chosen a certain time to go. Not just very accomplished yogis, even kings and others have chosen when to die. I'm sure everyone has heard of Bhishma. Of course, he was completely sort of with arrows during the Mahabharata war. That he was lying on a bed of arrows is more of a poetic expression of the fact that he had many arrow wounds. Yet he hung around until that time because his segment had not come. He wished to die in Uttarayana because he wanted to live in a certain solar segment. Predictions are basically about estimating the probability of an event occurring. Based on certain things which could turn out to be accurate, right now I can look at the sky and say if it will rain today or not. I have been right 90% of the time, but sometimes I was wrong. It is the same thing with life. There is no perfect estimate, but the more knowledgeable you are, the more accurate your estimates can be. Predicting death is also like this. This is like if you look at the speed, the angle, the ambient conditions, and all that, you can with some certainty say where the projectile will land. Rockets, missiles, artillery fire, or a golf ball are all worked upon by adjusting the angle and the speed of projectile. Similarly, reading your energy, how you are working out your prarabdha karma, and various other aspects of you, we can say, okay, this is how the trajectory of life will be. Based on this, in this culture, it was common for someone who was well versed with these things to look at someone and say, death is nearing for this person. So they would say, you better go to Kashi now. But some people went to Kashi and ended up living there for 20 or 30 years. That has also happened. With elaborate calculations, one can say this is how many years your body will last. But in between, if you start doing inner engineering, you can surprise the guy making the prediction because those practices can change the trajectory of your life and he was unable to factor that. This is why traditionally astrologers said if you are on the spiritual path, we will not make a prediction for you because with spiritual practices you are tampering with these calculations. You may die sooner or much later. All the other things, he said, also may happen or may not happen. Predictions may be accurate or off the mark, but when death is imminent, it can be perceived in different ways. If you are around animals, you will see that certain animals can sense death. Dogs, cats, cobras, and many other carnivorous animals can also smell death because, in a way, death has a smell. All the subtler aspects of the physical have their own smells. All carnivores have a special sense of smell because their entire survival process is in their nostrils. They have hearing and vision too, but these are not as keen as their sense of smell. If they want to know something, they don't look, they just smell it out. So, because they have such a keen sense of smell, most carnivorous animals know the onset of death. They can even smell death in advance, not months ahead, but within 48 days. It can be definitely be sensed. Human beings can know it too. But for example, with the kind of diet our brahmacharis eat, very easily one can develop a very keen sense of smell for these kinds of things. Once the bayus start exiting, there is a certain smell to them. This is something even modern science is finding out. They have found that humans have a unique death smell, which can be used to train dogs to find human cadavers. They have isolated some 8 key chemical compounds that make up the human scent of death. They say humans share this with pigs for whatever reasons. You can even smell a ghost because a ghost is just a subtle physical form that can be smelled. All dogs can do this. When there is a ghost, they start barking because they can smell the ghost. They cannot see, but they can smell it. So they get confused. They go and sit in one corner, put their tails between their legs, and bark. They can see that nothing is happening around, but there is some activity going on which makes them very nervous. Yet, smell is not the only indicator of death. You can even see death coming. This happened with one of our residents at the yoga center. Just before a large event in Erode one day, I was talking to 3 or 4 of our teachers about the arrangements for the events. This resident, who was also a teacher, was standing there. His wife was also a teacher, and she was there too. I looked at him and I did not do anything. I simply ignored him. Now, I never ever look at a person and ignore that person. That is not in me at all. Whoever they are, at least I will nod or do namaskaram or smile at them. I will definitely acknowledge their presence in some way, always. So after the event, suddenly this incident came to my mind. Why did I do this? I did not acknowledge him. I thought, why? Then the next evening I asked, where is he? They said, he has gone to Himalayas. I let it pass. I did not pay attention. You know, in our lives, there is no time to dwell upon anything, given the pace at which events happen at Isa. If there was a little time to dwell upon it, it would have been different. I thought about this and I left it. 3 days later, he just drowned in a stream in the Himalayas. When he was in front of me, there was certain lack of presence that was so glaring that I did not respond to him physically standing in front of me. When there is an imminent death, the defined boundaries of the body will be somewhat diffused, which will dilute one's physical presence in our vision. The experience of the physical is essentially because of its defined boundaries. When that is diffused, our visual experience is lowered. If I had not been so focused on going on stage for the event, if I had paid a little attention, I would have just told him. Normally, at least it was so at that time, if someone wanted to go to the Himalayas or such places, they would always tell me and go. But these people, the resident, his wife, and few other people decided to go without telling me. His death happened accidentally. But if it had not happened that way, it would have happened some other way. He was heading for it, and it was so visible, but I did not pay enough attention at that time. So, then are there signs that a common man can observe to be able to predict one's death? Yes, definitely. The transition from life to death is a transition from certain level of dynamism to a certain level of inertia. When this happens, there are certain things you can certainly notice within yourself. There are certain sure signs which can tell you, but it is such a complex process, it can always go wrong. Another reason why this is difficult is that people are no longer sensitive to what their body expresses on a daily basis. The body keeps changing all the time, even on a day to day basis, even within the day, the body is changing all the time. With everything, we have become modern, so we don't know a thing about these aspects. Most people don't even know when it is a full moon or a new moon without looking at their calendar. But the body clearly reads these things. If you are able to read these expressions, you will definitely know where the body is heading. Some very simple signs are very noticeable in the sense organs. For example, a person for whom this transition towards death has begun will not be able to look at the tip of their nose. Even a person with a short nose can still look at the tip of their nose in normal conditions. But when the process of death has started, your eyeballs will not focus. For those who are practicing Brahmadya sadhana, they will suddenly see that the eyeballs will wander like they are loose. They cannot go there. With breathe also, it is very noticeable. When you breathe, if you observe carefully, you will see that once the process of death is near, the breath will not go into the lower lobe of the lung. You will breathe mainly from the middle and the upper lobes. It is to help the organs shut down one by one. But maybe you are an asthmatic or someone who breathes like that most of the time, so you don't have to think I'm going to die. If you are very conscious of the different agnis in the body, you will notice when certain dimensions of fire are gone. Once it is gone, you know it is only a question of limited amount of time. Foreseeing death up to 4 to 6 months is very much a possibility. So at that time, if you become meditative, you will go peacefully and joyfully. And the shutting down will happen well. Otherwise, if you fight it and do this and that, you will live in ugly ways. It may become painful and disturbed. I can say a few more things about it, but we must understand the consequence of what we say. People will not keep this to themselves. They will look at someone, and if their beard looks a little yellowish, they will make a prediction that this person will die in 3 days because someone told them it is a sign. They will not keep quiet about it. They will tell this person and everyone around him that he is going to die in 3 days. They will even gather around him just to watch the prediction come true. Just the level of confusion and nonsense they will create will be huge. And if this person does not die, they may think they have to help him. I am not saying there is no relevance at all to knowing when one will die. We could also help people a little more with this. But there is no saying how people will use or misuse these things or confuse themselves completely. Above all, if they notice some signs in themselves, right or wrong, they might think they are going to die in 3 days. And instead of becoming more peaceful and calm, they will become fearful. All this is possible. This is why it is said that you must be ready for death every moment of your life. You should live your life in such a way that if you were to drop the dead next moment, you still have ended it reasonably well. You try to deal with it at the last moment is not the way. Moreover, if you understand that you are mortal, you look at it all the time, and if you are looking at it all the time, you will notice it. When it is time, you will know how to sit in a conducive place and die. That is the best way.